At exactly 2:29 a.m., November 21, 2025, Western Crimea, 15 miles offshore, a formation of 7 Ukrainian AN-196 Liutyi drones skimmed just above the water, flying at an altitude of barely 13 feet. Each drone held a steady speed of 102 miles per hour, carrying a forward-mounted HEI penetrator incendiary warhead. Their airframes were built from radar-absorbing composite materials, with a radar cross-section of only about 0.05 square meters, smaller than a seagull. They were closing in on the most heavily protected airspace in Crimea, heading straight toward the Airy Ridge, home to Russia's primary early warning radars overseeing the entire Black Sea and its near-stratospheric approaches. At 2,500 feet, a PD-2 reconnaissance drone, call sign Ghost 4, activated its infrared camera system, quietly scanning and mapping each target below. The entire landscape resolved itself into a digital battle space, a lattice of radars, sensors, weapons, and surveillance systems scattered across the Atri mountain slopes. Most prominent among them, on the eastern apron of Kecha Air Base, a K-27 helicopter sat on standby. Heat blooming from its tail section and rotor hub showed the engines had just been warmed up. For Russian forces, this aircraft was the only platform capable of pairing with ground radar to detect sea drones or loitering UAVs. If it managed to get airborne, the entire Ukrainian drone operation risked exposure, which meant it had to be eliminated first. Ghost 4 began tagging each target, processing locally, then uplinking everything via the military Starlink network. Seconds later, the data was synchronized back down to the AN-196 strike swarm approaching from the sea. 2 minutes later, target distribution was complete. Drone number 1, K-27 intercept. Drone number 2, strike the 96L-6E. Drone number 3, hit the Nebo SV. Drone number 4, destroy the P-18. Drone number 5, neutralize the Lyra A-10. Drone number 6, approach the BK-16 patrol boat. Drone number 7, engage the Pantsir S-1 or its backup command sector. Each drone received orders through FHSS, frequency hopping spread spectrum, a constantly shifting, re-encrypted channel that cycled frequencies every 5 seconds. This method effectively nullified Russian electronic warfare attempts, blocking all jamming and takeover efforts. The moment the commands came through, each drone peeled away from the initial line of advance. They fanned out like independent arrowheads, streaking toward their targets. If nothing changed in the next 10 minutes, the entire Western Crimean early warning and tactical radar grid would vanish from the map. But at that exact moment, strange returns appeared on the radar screen of a Russian Baikov-class patrol vessel operating off Sevastopol, a string of tiny objects, stable speed, fixed altitude, moving straight toward the peninsula's most restricted airspace. The signals were so faint they flickered in and out with each radar sweep. The crew assumed it was sea clutter. But by the third sweep, everyone understood. This wasn't noise. This was real. A command snapped through the CIC. Switch to tracking mode, prepare missile launch. Seconds later, 5 surface-to-air missiles, worth tens of millions of rubles, erupted into the night sky without warning and without hesitation. They flew in semi-active radar guidance mode, locking onto reflections bouncing off the sea surface. The crew was convinced they had destroyed the targets. In 12 more seconds, a target eliminated report would be transmitted to Crimea's Coastal Air Defense Command. But as the smoke cleared, they saw something that shouldn't exist. The drone formation was still intact, unshaken, unchanged. Their objective remained brutally clear: cripple every early warning asset guarding Crimea's western flank. But to do that, they needed to bypass one more barrier: a Pantsir S, 1 battery positioned along the southern coastline. The Pantsir's radar swept endlessly, struggling to lock onto drones flying right above the sea. This was Russia's premier point defense system, designed to intercept cruise missiles, tactical aircraft, and medium-sized UAVs within 12 miles. But what it faced now did not exist in any Russian training manual. At exactly 2:35 a.m., the first 257 E-6E missiles blasted off their rails in semi-active radar mode. A third missile followed instantly. Within 20 seconds, 5 SAMs, worth over 30 million rubles, were on their way toward the Ukrainian drones. The Panzer crew expected radar locking, proximity fuses, and clean long-range kills. But the expectation collapsed. Every missile missed, detonating harmlessly in midair. Meanwhile, the Podlet K-1 radar, optimized to track cruise missiles from 186 miles away, was nearly useless against targets at such close range. On Ghost 4's infrared feed, the AN-196 drones stayed perfectly on course, each one holding speed, every flight path unchanged. With missiles failing, the Panzer switched to its final line of defense, 30mm autocannons. Both two A-38M barrels opened up, unleashing over 2,500 rounds per minute. Streaks of tracer carved across the night sky, a beautiful but meaningless light show. Every round splashed into the sea, missing the drones by dozens of feet. The Panzer operator faced a problem he had never been trained to understand. The radar was functioning, the system was reacting, but every weapon was failing. The reason lay in how the Ukrainian drones were flying, maintaining a precise altitude of 164 feet and cutting perpendicular across the Panzer's radar beam, a maneuver known as the Doppler notch. And before the Panzer operator could process why his missiles and radar were failing, an even worse image appeared on the infrared screen. A second drone formation was heading directly toward the heart of Crimea's defensive grid. Inside the Kacha command center, an air defense officer barked orders. "Get the K-27 airborne now. Activate FLIR, switch to manual UAV hunting. Turn toward Atri, reinforce radar coverage." But as the helicopter started rolling off the apron, Liutyi drone number 1 slammed straight into the Ka-27. The detonation punched through the fuselage, ignited the main fuel tank, and tore the rotor mast apart instantly. A vertical fireball erupted. Shrapnel ripped into the adjacent radar cabin, triggering secondary fires. The entire air navigation station was engulfed in under 20 seconds. Drone number 2 approached from the southwest, hugging the low ridgeline. Ahead, the 96 L6E radar tower loomed in the infrared scope. This was the target allocation brain for the S-400 Kuban batteries in the region. If it fell, every S-400 launcher nearby would be reduced to static decorations. The drone operator tightened his grip. Liutyi number 2 climbed to 60 feet, just enough to lock its attack angle. Its speed nudged upward, optimizing penetration and explosive depth. Time to target, 7 seconds. At that point, the drone effectively turned itself into a live round, driving straight into the brain of Russia's air defense network. Impact. The camera jolted as drone number 2 slammed into the 96 L6E antenna. The explosion tore the entire top assembly apart. Cooling grids folded in on themselves. Radar modules were shredded. A slug of molten copper from the HEI warhead punched straight into the signal processing core. Result? The entire 96 L6E went dark. The control screens turned black. Nearby S-400 launchers dropped into passive standby mode. No target designation data. The S-400, Russia's flagship strategic air defense system in Crimea, was now nothing more than a row of silent steel tubes standing against the rock face. At Gvardeyskoye Air Base, a Su-30SM roared off the runway, carrying 2 R-73 missiles and its Bars-N phased array radar, hoping to intercept a low-flying UAV wave that had appeared on tactical warning screens. What the pilot didn't know, these were decoy Liutyi drones, programmed to emit signals and follow highly detectable routes. Their only purpose was to draw Russian attention and weapons away, so the real strike drones could hit their targets. Inside the cockpit, the pilot received a clear order from ground control. Activate bars. Prioritize low-altitude targets. Feed radar data. Switch to infrared pulse tracking if required. 30 seconds after Bars N went active, everything became meaningless. The display showed scattered white specks, non-stationary, non-repeating. The pilot adjusted scan angle, narrowed the beam, increased gain, but the targets continued to dissolve into clutter. Lost lock. Unable to maintain target. Signal appears, then disappears. Not enough to fire. Bars N began its target verification cycle. To confirm a real target, the system required 5 consecutive stable sweeps, the minimum requirement to build a track file. The drones never allowed that to happen. They continuously lowered their radar profile, slipped off the beam axis, or dropped into the Doppler null region after only 2 or 3 sweeps. The pilot tried adjusting sensitivity, but it made no difference. Every time bars tried to lock on, the target simply disappeared from the screen as if it never existed. In the pilot's headset, the tone grew sharp. Radar cannot maintain lock. I'm firing into the void. With no options left, the pilot decided to fire. An R-73 dropped from its rail. In under 4 seconds, its solid-fuel motor pushed it to Mach 2.5, nearly 1,900 miles per hour. A supersonic spear, engineered to kill fighter jets at short range with extreme agility. But there was a problem. The infrared seeker couldn't lock onto the target. Result: the missile veered 12 degrees off axis, lost lock, and self-detonated in mid-air. While the Su-30 pilot was still scrambling to chase the second UAV wave, drone number 3 had already completed its attack arc, diving straight into the dome of the Nebo SV radar. At exactly 2:47:41 a.m., it performed a dive from 72 feet. The HEI penetrator incendiary struck dead center on the dome. Composite panels ripped open. Blast pressure peeled the outer shell backward like an inverted parachute. A jet of molten copper, formed by the high-velocity penetrator, burned deep into the transmitter core. The radar's radio frequency output vanished from the spectrum in exactly 1 second. Kacha Air Base instantly lost the ability to detect stealth aircraft, long-range cruise missiles, and all high-altitude threats. The Nebo SV, once the backbone for tracking platforms like the F-35, was now nothing more than a heap of smoldering debris. From the northwest, drone number 4 hugged the mountainside, hiding within natural shadows, only 20 to 26 feet off the ground. Ahead, the P-18 Terek radar glowed clearly in infrared, a 39-foot mesh antenna spinning slowly between 2 ridgelines like an isolated spine. This was the last operational low-altitude UAV defense layer. Its meter-band frequency had been optimized for tracking low-altitude drones, especially in cluttered terrain. If this radar fell, the southern flank and all airspace under 330 feet would go completely blind. At exactly 2:47:59 a.m., drone number 4 locked its target. Dive angle, 38 degrees. Impact speed, approximately 100 miles per hour. The strike hit the power converter cluster at the antenna base. The explosion produced no massive fireball, but it snapped the rotation shaft and ignited the signal transmission module. The P-18 Terek was reduced to a charred tilted antenna swaying in the wind. From the southeast, drone number 5 skimmed the tree line and crossed the auxiliary runway. Through the infrared lens, the Lyra A-10 radar station glowed hot, a cubic thermal beacon guiding all landing and navigational operations for Kacha Air Base. At 2:48:15 a.m., the drone aligned its attack vector and drove straight into the rear service hatch, where the radar's switching cabinets were housed. Impact altitude, 30 feet. The penetrator warhead detonated inside the transmitter core. Doppler processors and phase generators melted instantly. The Lyra A-10 went offline. Kacha Air Base was now blind. Russian aircraft could no longer return safely in low visibility conditions. At the S-400 Kuban command post, alarms flashed red. No input from 96L6E. NABO link lost. Unable to track. Inside Crimea's Air Defense Coordination Center, red alerts blinked across 6 control stations simultaneously. The S-400 system reported status blind. Every Panzer, Tor, S-300 and S-400 unit on the peninsula had lost its sensor nerve center. Western Crimea's strategic air defense architecture had collapsed. On airspace control maps used by both Russia and NATO, Crimea once operated over 12 synchronized radar stations, covering 3 surveillance layers: long-range, mid-range, and low-altitude. Tonight, nearly 40% of that capability evaporated. No more low-altitude UAV detection. No more long-range over-the-sea warning. No more coordination between radars, launchers, and command centers. Crimea, the most fortified region in Russia's arsenal, had become a blind airspace. Anything entering it would not be detected. From Sevastopol to Gvardeyskoye, Russian air defense stations transmitted status reports no one wanted to read. But the Russian Ministry of Defense could not acknowledge any of it publicly. Meanwhile, Ukraine's HUR posted footage online: UAVs dodging Panzer fire, thermal video of a Ka-27 erupting into flames, the direct hit on the 96L6E, the shattered radar dome of Nebo SV, P-18 Nebo SV, Lyra A-10. One by one, every radar cluster went dark. The OSINT community confirmed the coordinates: Kacha, Atri, Crimea, leaving Russia no room for denial. 27 was more than eliminating a platform. It severed the ears and eyes of the Russian Navy. The Ka-27 isn't a fighter, but it is the center of Russia's ASW, patrol, and maritime navigation ecosystem. Losing one in combat-ready condition at Kacha was a direct blow to fleet coordination, something Russia cannot easily replace. The destruction of these radars didn't merely blind Crimea temporarily. It peeled away the sensor layers protecting the western flank. From now on, every Ukrainian strike would require fewer drones, less effort, and carry a higher chance of success. Russia's air defense wall was no longer intact. Crimea was no longer safe. And above all, Ukraine gained something priceless: psychological space. When a cheap drone can pierce the heart of Russia's air defenses without being shot down, faith in the system, in command, in the rear, begins to collapse. For Ukraine, the message was unmistakable. Crimea is no longer a fortress. We can come any time we choose, and when we do, no one will stop us.